What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to do a little bonus video. We're not going to cover any serious topic or anything. It's more of a story time video. I had a little extra time this week and decided to give you guys kind of a bonus video of the week. It's a little extra content that you guys might like hearing about. Today, the topic is going to be about Unsat. The story that I'm going to talk about is when I received an Unsat for the day whenever I was in Common Core. I personally like hearing about flights that maybe didn't go as well as the person intended. Obviously, I also like hearing about positive flights that went outstanding, but those are good. But a lot of times you can learn a lot from maybe flights that didn't go so well, especially in flight school, because you're new, you don't know how to fly yet, you're learning, and you're going to have some hard days. And I think packaging up this story and delivering it to you guys might, I guess, kind of alleviate some stress on days maybe that weren't the greatest for you in flight school. So this story in particular, I received an Unsat for the day, and it was for the most stupidest task ever, the fuel check. And if you're in Common Core right now, or you've made it through Common Core and you're well on your way, everyone knows that the fuel check is very easy to do, but a lot of times you can easily forget to do it. You're very task saturated in the beginning of flying, and it's just one of those things that slips your mind sometimes, and you might be killing it that day. And if I recall correctly, I think I had a pretty good flight this day, and well, we'll get into the story. So anyways, on this particular day, I was still in Common Core. I think I was in P2 at the time. P2, I think, is a fun phase of Common Core. You've moved past P1, which is the initial phase of Common Core, and you're into P2. So you've already passed your first check ride, and now you're learning, now you're doing all of the things you did in P1, but you're doing more of the advanced stuff like run-on landings, auto rotations, things that when you were in P1, you're like, man, how am I ever going to be able to do that? And you're actually doing this in P2. You've already been introduced to the task in P1, but you're actually doing them to standard in P2. And at the end of P2, your check ride, you'll be doing a lot of the more advanced stuff. So we were in P2. We're getting close to the end of P2. If I can recall correctly, I think we were like 2 weeks out from my check ride, maybe, give or take. And I flew second on this day. So my stick buddy, he flew out of Cairns, went to the staging field, did his portion, we changed out. I started at the staging field and started doing traffic pattern work, started doing those run-on landings and auto rotations, steep approaches to a sit-down, all of those things that you do in P2. And like I said, I recall I had a pretty good day this day. We finish up at the staging field, and it's time to fly back to Cairns. So put our corridor in and got us set up for going into Cairns, and I'm like, I had a good day today. I'm thinking that in my head. And I think we get about 10 miles outside of Cairns. Don't quote me on that. I forget the stage field we were at. It was the stage field that had that beautiful, nice, massive house on it. I know if you're in P2 right now, you probably know what staging field that I'm talking about. But it was one of my favorite staging fields. I just loved flying over that beautiful house. I'm sure the people in that house didn't love it very much, but it was always kind of cool coming down on your approaches. Of course, depending on what the winds were from over that beautiful house, they had a nice pool and everything. It was that staging field. So, like I said, we get up, we start heading back to Cairns, And like I said, cruising right along, my IP looks over at me and he goes, "Hey, did you start a fuel check?" And I'm like, no. And he's like, "Well, it's going to be an unsat for the day." And I'm like, man, I was crushed. I was completely crushed. And in my head, I was kind of like, man, I really hope we get to the debrief and he kind of lets this slide. He didn't let it slide. So get into Karen's, get out of the aircraft, go to the table, do a debrief. And typically, when you have to go in for a debrief, obviously this is IP dependent, but my IP, if you were going to do a debrief, they didn't happen very often, but when they did happen, it was kind of, you kind of knew that you were going to get your ass chewed out a little bit. And today was one of those days. He laid into my stick buddy a little bit, and then he then looks at me and he's like, "Hey man, you know, pretty good flight, but gotta unsat you because your fuel check is one of those tasks that you should do to standard at this point, and you didn't do it to standard because you didn't do it at all." And I was like, "Okay, roger that, move out." And I remember walking to the parking lot. I was talking to my stick buddy about it, and I was like, I was so tore up about it because I had received an unsat for the day. And looking back on it now, it's kind of silly. An unsat for the day is really not that big of a deal. If it becomes a habit, like you get 2 or 3 unsats in a row, I think that it could be a bigger deal. I think that you have to go get a counseling with the commander or whatever, and then if it continues, it gets escalated all the way to the point that you could potentially be recycled or dropped. That never happened to me, fortunately. I did receive an unsat here and there. It wasn't very frequently, but it never was like multiple days in a row or anything like that. And unsats are going to happen. You're new to aviation. They're going to happen. So my advice to you guys is don't let it crush you. Obviously, learn from it. And I can guarantee you one thing, I didn't miss a fuel check from that day forward. I mean, I would write it down on my kneeboard, fuel check. I would do my own fuel check. I'd tell my stick buddy to do the fuel check. Like, I was set on fuel checks. But it's such a dumb thing to get an unsat for. But I do remember being crushed over it. And I thought about that for like 2 or 3 days later. It's like, man, shit, I had an unsat. And I think I was letting it affect me because I thought it was a bigger deal than what it really was. It really isn't that big of a deal to receive one unsat. And to be honest with you, I think that was my only one unsat in Common Core. Obviously, I got another one when we moved to Blackhawks, but I think that was my only unsat in Common Core. So my advice to you guys, and the whole point of making this is, if you receive an unsat in flight school, don't let it tear you up. Water off a duck's back. Don't even think about it. Move on. Don't make the same mistake again, but move on. Throw it away. There's way too much stuff to worry about in flight school to dwell over a stupid unsat. But I just wanted to give that to you guys. Hopefully you guys think it's funny and you learn from it. Like I said, the biggest thing is learn from your mistakes, move on, and don't let that mistake tear you down. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Stay tuned, more content coming. Thank you guys.